What is the legitimate function of government in a free society? If you look at Article 1, Section 8, Congress is authorized to do 21 things. Nowhere in our Constitution do we find authority for Congress to tax and spend for up to 3/4 of what Congress taxes and spends for today. We can safely say that we've made a significant departure from the constitutional principles of individual freedom and limited government that made us a rich nation in the first place. And these principles of freedom were embodied in our nation through the combined institutions of private property and free enterprise. Now, through numerous successful attacks, private property and free enterprise, what some people call capitalism, that the framers envisioned are mere skeletons of their past. And Thomas Jefferson anticipated this when he said, and I quote him, "The natural progress of things is for government to gain ground and for liberty to yield." The best way of looking at this process of how government is gaining ground and liberty yielding is to ask what has happened to taxation and spending in our nation. Ladies and gentlemen, there's only one way to look at taxation. Taxes represent government claims on private property. And indeed, if government were to tax at 100%, it would just confiscate private property. An even better measure of what government does is to look at what has happened to spending over the course of our history. In 1902, for example, expenditures at all levels of government totaled $1.7 billion. The average taxpayer that year paid $60 in federal, state, and local taxes. In fact, from 1787 until 1925, federal expenditures were a mere 3% of the GDP, except during wartime. Today, federal expenditures alone are close to $4 trillion, slightly over $4 trillion, nearly 25% of the GDP. State and local governments spend about $3 trillion. That means today, the average taxpayer pays more than $10,000 in federal, state, and local taxes. Now, the significance of this is that as time goes by, you and I own less and less of our most valuable property, namely ourselves and the fruits of our labor. Another way of looking at this is that the average taxpayer works from January 1st until the beginning of May to pay federal, state, and local taxes. And what that means is that we're going on 5 months out of the year, and we do not have rights to decide how the fruits of our labor will be used. Somebody else makes that decision. And keep in mind that in slavery, you work all year, and it's somebody else who makes the decision how the fruits of your labor will be used. Now, in the economic sphere, the founders thought that relatively free markets, or what is called capitalism, was the most effective social organization for the promotion of individual freedom. Indeed, capitalism is defined as a system wherein individuals are free to pursue their own interests There's voluntary exchange. There are private property rights in goods and services. Much of the original intent of the United States Constitution, as seen in the document itself, and also as seen in the documents that debated the Constitution, such as the Federalist Papers, was to bring about a climate in which this kind of social organization could occur. Now, the great benefit of the free enterprise system is that through private ownership and control, it minimizes the capacity of one person to coerce another person. Additionally, the coercive powers of the state are minimized and restricted to the legitimate functions of the state in a free society. And what are the legitimate functions of the state in a free society? Well, one legitimate function is to protect you and me against international thugs violating our private property rights. So that says that one legitimate function is to provide for national defense. Another legitimate function of the state in a free society is to protect you and me from domestic thugs violating our private property rights. And so that says at some level there should be the provision of police services. And by the way, when I say private property, I mean ourselves. That is, I belong to Walter Williams and you belong to you. You are your own private property. Now, other legitimate functions of the state in a free society are those of enforcing constitutional order, the adjudication of disputes, and the provision of certain public goods that benefit all Americans as opposed to specific Americans. In order to pay for these legitimate functions and constitutionally mandated functions, each of us is obligated to pay our share, according to the Constitution. Now, some people might argue, or some of your professors or some of your lawyers might say, well, this guy Williams, he's being too limited about the Constitution. The Constitution is a living document. Well, anybody who says that the Constitution is a living document is at the same time saying that we don't have a Constitution. That is, in order for a Constitution to mean anything, it must be fixed. That is, we can think of the Constitution as our rules of the game. Anybody who says that the Constitution is living, he's ignoring the fact that we have a Constitution at all. Or think of it this way, how many of you would like to play me poker this evening and the rules be living? And maybe under certain circumstances, my two pair can beat your three of a kind. Now, the Constitution is indeed flexible. The founders built some flexibility in the Constitution, namely Article 5, as a way to amend the Constitution.